continue going on down to picks 80 through 61. So if you want to hit that next slide here. So be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified. We're going to go through 80 through 61 here. Starting off with Jalen Wright, running back from Tennessee. Great combine. He actually had a nice little fan base up there at the combine I saw. And so running backs from Tennessee, I guess they're okay. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Obviously, Saints fans, calm down. But I think he's a guy that's risen up a lot of draft boards. I think he's put himself in that conversation to potentially be up there, considered as one of the top running backs. It's if there's going to be a team that just really falls in love with him compared to if they're scared off of Jonathan Brooks ACL or something like that, or if they want another type of running back who I think could be a 3-down back for you guys here as well. Really like what Jalen Wright has to bring to any of the NFL teams.
Yeah. I mean, so he is, I would define him as a speed back, but his speed to power, that's usually a term used for edge rushers, but like he takes that speed and he hits the hole really hard, and he can be in goal line situations. He can be in third down situations. I want to say he's a pretty good pass blocker. Maybe needs a little bit of refinement in that area, but to get a complete back with his level of speed, especially for specific offenses, like if you run a lot of outside zone where there's not a defined gap that he's going to be filling, like getting a guy like Jalen Wright that can just absolutely explode through those offensive lines and whatever hole opens up, I think would be extremely valuable here. And getting him in the third round for some teams, maybe that feels a little rich, but I really like what he brings to the table here. So another guy I like, Sione Vakai, the safety from Utah. Him and Cole Bishop were kind of the heart of this secondary in Utah this year. And man, both those guys are going to be drafted probably in the top 120, 125. Vakai here, obviously, we have in the third round, but I like what he brings to the table. He's very versatile. He comes downhill well. He sees coverages and route concepts really well. And I like, again, this safety class, I like what they all bring to the table here. So
yeah. And so it's going to be unique to see where all those guys fall, as we talked about already with some of the other picks. And so Brendan Rice, receiver from USC, son of Jerry Rice, had a good combine. Actually, I really like he had a nice little like shoestring grab, even in front of his father. So he's got the athleticism. I think he's just going to be a solid receiver in the NFL. I would say maybe I don't want to say David Bell's not a solid receiver, but I feel like he'll maybe even more like kind of like an Elijah Moore light, so to say. I think he's just going to be consistent. I think he's a guy that you can lean on, can get you 600, 800 yards in a season, and be a good receiver 3, receiver 2. Maybe like a KJ Osborne. I think that might be a good comparison. And so I'm curious to see where he's going to fall once again too with all these receivers, especially these late round receivers as well, with how much great talent there is early on. There's not really much to say about them that stands out.
With Brendan Rice, he is not the polished guy that I think you want, but I think you look at his physical gift, 6'3", 215, ran well at the combine, and like you look at what you could hopefully turn him into. And the biggest thing that I got from him at the Senior Bowl was just his mentality. He's a dog, and he wears that chip on his shoulder, and he's a great athlete. I think he just needs to be a little refined. He kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Michael Pittman, but with like more outside prowess and more outside dominance. And like, again, I've talked a lot about how deep this wide receiver class is. He in a normal class would be at the beginning of the second round, maybe middle second round, which is where Michael Pittman Jr. was drafted by the Colts. It's just this class is so freaking good that he falls all the way down here. So next up, the first quarterback off the board, Michael Pratt from Tulane. He has some really good tape from a few seasons ago. I believe he tore his ACL, and then when he came back this year, he just didn't quite look the same. A lot of guys we're talking about potentially at a few seasons ago, we're potentially talking about how he could be a very solid developmental prospect in early day 2, maybe late day 1. And now he's kind of here in the middle of day 3 or day 2. potentially the beginning of day 3, just kind of depending on the value here. I think there's a few other guys in this class. There's 6 guys at the top, and then you have Spencer Rattler and maybe a few others that I think would be in contention for a role like him. But he's going to be a little bit more of your pocket passer. He is athletic enough to move, but he's not a Drake May where he's really going to lead the team in rushing or have any significant amount of rushing yards. He's really going to have to be the cerebral assassin from the pocket where he dices up defenses that way.
Yeah. No, he's a good project. I think for teams to develop. I could see a team maybe like Denver, if they figure out the quarterback situation elsewhere in free agency, as we are recording this Monday night on March the 11th. So if he want to take him there and maybe develop as a project, who knows? So to say, whatever happens with Denver, or just some other options. And so, last on this page though, here, Troy Franklin. I know, Ryan, you have a lot of opinions on him, but he's fallen a lot on our boards here. I think I would maybe rank him a little bit higher, but I think we compromised a little bit on this number here. What are some of your concerns with Troy Franklin?
Size. He doesn't quite have this. Given his lack of size, he doesn't quite have the speed to really make up for it. He doesn't really run great routes on tape. He doesn't look fluid all the time. And I don't know. I just am not really a fan. I will take the blame for having him all the way down here in the middle of the 3rd round. I was the one that was pushing for him to possibly even be further down the board. And I just am not a fan. Like if I were a GM on a team, I would totally scratch Troy Franklin off my board and just be like, I'm not touching this player. I just don't like what he really brings to the NFL. Like it's just, I don't know. I just don't. The style of play, maybe I'm also a Patriots fan. Maybe Tyquan Thornton scared the crap out of me, and like those guys are built almost the exact same. And besides running go balls, like I just don't really see what else that he does super well on the field. And he's more of a body catcher. Like he doesn't even really catch the ball away from his body. You saw that in the gauntlet drill at the combine. I know it's the drill at the combine, but like he was just kind of all over the place. He dropped a few balls, and he just wasn't. It didn't have it all together, and it was just, I don't know. It was a very disheartening performance from him at the combine, and especially with a guy like him, I already had questions about his tape, and he didn't really do anything to settle my qualms at the combine. So
no, it's gonna be interesting how some of these Oregon guys fall. Like we didn't even have Bucky Irving on the top 100 yet, just because.
To be fair, he's at like 104. Like
it was like at 104. To be fair, but some of those guys though I think work perfectly in that Oregon Pac-12 offense, and I'm also referring to Bo Nix here as well, who we'll get to here at some point. But curious though how it translates over to the NFL. So I'm curious to see Troy Franklin. I would maybe not put him this low, but I think we'd compromise. So I'm curious to hear everybody's thoughts. So leave a comment down below where you think Troy Franklin should be. So let's move on now to the next 5 here, starting number 75. Trey Benson, running back from Florida State, and so one of the top running backs in this class. Not the stud running back class like how it was last year, but there's still some great names in this class. We've already gone over a couple with Jalen Wright and Ray Davis. Now we got Trey Benson here coming up on Blake Corum and Jonathan Brooks as well. I think Trey Benson's just going to be a guy that he could be a 3-down back for you. He could be a 3-down back for you. He could catch the ball out of the backfield. Yeah. He can run in between the tackles. I think he's going to add it. I think he just fits that mold of a traditional. But not traditional, of a modern day running back now. It's interesting. We were even talking about Braylon Allen before, who didn't make the top 100, but like he is to me just like a Derrick Henry. You just that big old beefy guy you want to run between the tackles. Then as a defender, you don't want to be hit by him. No. He does not really have much pass catching capabilities. So just like Derrick Henry, he's really a 1st down, 2nd down kind of guy, or maybe on 3rd and short. Who knows what's going to happen? Trey Benson, though, I think that he's that modern day 3-down type back. And so Blake Fisher, offensive tackle from Notre Dame, he's another guy as well, too, who had a solid career, solid season at the college, but he was just overshadowed a little bit by the guy playing across from him at the same position. I'm referring to Gabriel Murphy, who was at 97 or something like that.
Yeah.
They had to a lot too. Joe Alt we're going to talk to him here towards the end of this episode. But Blake Fisher was right tackle for Notre Dame. Great career, very solid. I think any team that's going to get him here in this middle of the third round type range, he could be late second to late third. I think he's going to get a very solid tackle that you can develop and keep. At minimum, he's going to be a good depth piece to come in.
Yeah, and I really like Blake Fisher. I think technically he has a lot of really solid traits going forward. I think he's just a little bit older. He plays that right tackle spot, which is slightly less coveted than the left tackle spot. And so I like what he brings, and I think this is good value here for anybody looking specifically for a right tackle. And then next up on the board is Brandon Dorlus. We talked a little bit about Michael Hall in the mid 90s, and to me, Brandon Dorlus is just a plus version of Michael Hall. It's going to be a little bit bigger, going to have a little bit more, I think, versatility, maybe a slightly better athlete. Both those guys are pretty athletic, but it's going to be 6'3", 290. Again, kind of that tweener size, but really solid pass rush moves. It'll be curious to see how he translates to the next level. Sometimes these tweener guys don't do as well. But if you're looking for a situational interior pass rusher, Brandon Dorlus, Michael Hall, back end of the third round, I think is where you're really going to find those guys that you're really going to like, unless you go for like a Braden Fisk earlier, although he's bigger than all of these guys. So
yeah,
I really like Brandon Dorlus. I think if you get him in the right scheme, he would be a very nice fit for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move on now to Ted Walker. I know you've seen him play live. Actually, you saw him get destroyed at Georgia Tech on that.
Yeah,
hit.
that was he got smacked hard.
God, that was a hard hit. That one hurt me when I was watching on TV. But
yeah,
he's had a very unique offseason. He came in very high potential first round pick. Maybe he is still a potential first round pick. Had an okay Senior Bowl practice. Did not have a good Senior Bowl game. But I think that also being said, though, he had a bunch of targets thrown to him. But then at the combine, I thought that he looked solid as well.
Yeah.
He came in 6'1", 1.5, 193 pounds, 33.25-inch arms. Ran a 4.36 40, which for his size is really good. A 1.54 10-yard split. So in general, he was overall athletically was one of the top receivers. I'm curious on your thoughts because I can see him going here. But also, in all honesty, I could see a team like the Chiefs being like, I really like this guy, at the 32nd overall pick, and we know that they need a receiver.
Yeah.
And so,
honestly, to me, his biggest question is his hands. I actually think he runs good routes. Once the ball is in his hands, he's good after the catch. And I like what he does. It's just at the catch point is where I kind of have concerns, and that's pretty important for the position that he plays. So
and that was actually my thing. I want to address that a little bit on the route running because I think I agree with you on in routes or out routes, but on some of those deep go ball routes, and of course this is just the Senior Bowl, so it's a timing thing and everything like that. It felt like he just kind of he would just lose where he was at times, and he would just kind of just fade off,
to me, it felt like he struggled tracking, and then he would just kind of run straight. He wouldn't do anything to potentially throw the DB off. Sorry.
No. And I think that's great. And kind of what I was trying to say as well. It is the Senior Bowl, so it's his first time getting reps. Now, if it's week 17 and he's been playing with a quarterback for an entire season and that's still going on, okay, we might have some concerns. It's an exhibition game, so maybe we're reading too much into it. But I think it's going to be very unique on where Ted Walker goes because, as we've already mentioned as well, just how many receivers are in this class. So let's wrap up the 70s with Kyrie Jackson here, cornerback out of Oregon. On the bigger side as well, which I find very unique, 6'4", 194. So he is going to be – he reminds me who's the
Tariq Woolen?
No. Well, I don't know how tall Tariq Woolen is, but I was thinking –
Juju Brents. Oh, Juju Brents. Yeah, it's similar, 6'3", 200 for him. If you need outside corners, Kyrie Jackson. If you need size at the outside corner position, Kyrie Jackson is your guy.
I will say, as a Falcons fan, Jeff Okuda's moved on. We have Clark Phillips, who's the exact opposite size of Kyrie Jackson. This is in that range, I think, for the Falcons. As a Falcons fan, if you couldn't tell. that if we're gonna get a corner, I think he's a guy here in this range, just because absolutely that you put him across AJ Terrell. Still needs some development, but I think he tested well at the combine. I think that he's done. I thought he did well against the Washington receivers, and so as best he could. So I think, to your point, an outside corner for any team looking for him here in this middle third round range, I think is going to be perfect.
Yeah, no, exactly, and he does have some limitations physically, just with that size. The bigger you are, the harder it is to get your hips around, and just the more effort it takes. But athletically, I think he checked all the boxes, not exceeding anything, but again, just going to be a good matchup piece here in the third round. So
Yeah,
let's move on here at pick 70. Braylon Trice once was a first round hopeful, and now kind of down here, end of round 2, beginning of round 3 value, I think, just because he's going to be the 6'5", 275 kind of a tweener. He's going to have to be scheme specific. He's probably going to have to be a 4-3 defensive end, and he can crash the pocket and he can crash the pocket and get after the passer really well, and he does really well in the run game. However, at times he does disappear. He doesn't have the greatest amount of bend at that size to really get around tackles and get pressure off the edge. So he does have a really good bull rush. We saw that a little bit in the Texas game in the college football semifinals, but just a really solid player here. He has good play strength. He's going to be ready to play. He just needs to go to the right scheme.
Yeah. There's something about him. I was thinking about it. Is if you go look at like the Dallas Turner or the Jared Verses or even the Chop Robinson as well, as they just have that just amazing athletic capability as well. And some of those guys can maybe even improv a little bit more. Kind of like, so if like you're comparing it to a quarterback, it's like those guys are like the Patrick Mahomes. While I look at like a Braylon Trice almost as more like a Matt Ryan, where I feel like he's like more kind of like it has to be in the system, so to say, where there's that improvisation isn't nearly as much. And so I don't know if that makes sense. It does in my head, and that's the most important thing. But Braylon Trice, I agree with you. I think he's the team that drafts him is going to get a great player that can come in and help contribute. But it is going to be, I think his draft stock has fallen a little bit compared to just some of the other testing and capability from what we've seen from some of the other players. So Blake Corum, running back from Michigan, he went up against Braylon Trice and won several times. Actually, Donovan Edwards might have won a couple more times, but that's neither here nor there. But I really like him as a running back. I'm curious on where he falls, because I think if there's one thing he maybe could improve on a little bit, might be the pass catching. I think one thing going against him, he is a little bit on the older side for running back. So like he's got his rookie contract, so it's going to be, but then he's going to be 27 or 28 at the end of the rookie contract, depending on where he gets drafted. Let me double check that real quick. But what do you like about Blake Corum that might put him a little bit over Trey Benson or some of the other running backs?
To me, he's the best combination of all the skill sets that you want. He's a good receiving back. He has good speed. He can run outside zone. He can run gap schemes and kind of inside zone. He's just a really well put together back. He's a finished product, and they even lined him up or like simulcammed him up with some of the other running backs in the combine, and like his play speed and just how fast he actually gets upfield is really impressive. And I think some team's going to be really happy with him. To me, this is the kind of back that like why you, and not to make fun of the Falcons, but like this back is why you don't draft the Bijan at 8th overall, because you could go do that and then get a guy like Blake Corum here at late round 2, early round 3, and it's like, all right, he does 90 to 95% of things that Bijan does, and so that's like he's like 90 to 95% of Bijan in my eyes.
Yeah, but
Bijan is much better, a much better prospect than him. I'm going to say that very clearly. It's just you look at a guy like Blake Corum that can catch, he can run, he can do just about everything, and it's like getting a guy like that at the end of the second, into the third round is going to be an awesome value for some teams.
So I'll push back a little bit on like he can catch, but I think it's not his strength. Unlike if I go look at a Trey Benson or either the Ray Davis or some of the other guys who have come behind him. And then Jonathan Brooks, I think, is still the best running back in this class.
Yeah.
But then I think just going with the Bijan, what separates Bijan is his overall, like, you don't really need another running back.
Yes, I agree.
You know what I mean? And so I think with a guy like
Bijan ran wide receiver drills last year at the combine as like for fun, and people were legitimately saying like he would be a top 10 wide receiver in this wide receiver class.
Well, and that's what
you're not saying that about Blake Corum.
No. Well, and that's what with him and Jahmyr Gibbs, like,
yeah,
they're putting him in a slot. You know, so you're not gonna do that with Corum here. So I think it's gonna be very interesting on where these two guys go. I think even more interesting is gonna be Spencer Rattler, someone who we have really been grown on, someone who we've known. Not we personally, but I mean us as viewers of college football and football in general. It's weird saying like we've known him now for 4 years. Like he's had a very unique ride, I would say, almost minus the national championships, but like a Jalen Hurts-esque type ride, you know, so to say, which is unique now, I think, to all of us in watching football, just with the new transfer portal deal. So what are some of the things that you like about Spencer Rattler?
He's really experienced. He, for the most part, takes really good care of the football. He sees defenses really well. He has plus arm strength. He has really good improv in his game. He creates really well. The biggest thing I think with him is just he's 6 foot, 5'11", 6 foot. His arm is good. Like he has a good arm. It's not like a Josh Allen howitzer. Like it's not on that level. It's not, but it's not even really close to that. And I think at the NFL, he might just be too small. Like he's just not a big guy. And then I said he takes care of the football most of the time. Sometimes he does have a propensity to just kind of throw the ball up and see what happens. And at the NFL, you can't do that.
Yeah. Now it's going to be interesting to see because I think of all of after those top 6 quarterbacks, so to say, I think he's the one that I would say like next would be the best project, just because he does have the physical intangibles. You know, he is, I would consider him a dual threat quarterback. He can throw it. He has the experience going up against top competition, you know, and I think we have seen his maturity over the past couple of years as well. So I think it'd be very unique for a team in the early 3rd round. Especially too, if you go look at it, like I know we've mocked even your Patriots taking him there just as a flyer to develop and like, let's see what happens, you know? So especially the Patriots right now haven't figured out what's going to, as of recording this, haven't figured out that quarterback situation just yet. So let's wrap this up here with on this slide, at least Junior Colson and Malachi Corley. Junior Colson, linebacker from Michigan, super big guy. It's going to be interesting to see him run downhill very well. Malachi Corley, that's a guy that you really like coming from Western Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, if you want yak, this is your guy. Led the nation in yards after catch. Is probably more of a running back, you know, that plays wide receiver than anything. But 6 foot, 210, 215, I think, and just
I'll double check here.
built like a running back. And man, he puts people on the ground like he's a running back. He's so impressive. All of that being said, he doesn't really run a lot of routes. He kind of runs like maybe deep crossers and screen passes. But again, if you're a team that wants to utilize a gadget player, he has good top end speed. He is very elusive in space. He's hard to bring down. This would be a guy that I think that teams like that would really enjoy. He's just not quite the route runner of like a Debo that you want.
Yeah, but to your point, that if you're looking for a Debo, this is going to be the guy. 5'11", 215, that is what you talked about. You can put him in the backfield to kind of have that's that same Debo-esque size. And so, but you're right, Debo has that other level route running capability. He's almost going to be more kind of like you utilize him as a Debo, but then when you pass him the ball, it's going to be in like Tyreek Hill-esque situations. So to say, you don't know where the screen plays or underneath is like where you know there's going to be an open field. You get from the ball and just let it work.
Yeah.
So
some team I think is going to get really lucky drafting him here. So Let's move on to the final 5 of this 20. This is another guy I'm really high on, Cameron Kitchens. He didn't test super well athletically at the combine, but on tape, his athleticism stands out a little bit. But his instincts are what I really like in what he brings to the table. He has great instincts for a safety. He can come in and be a single high safety right away. He can also play cover 2. He can play down in the box. A little bit undersized. You probably don't want to keep him down in the box for too long. But again, he comes down. He can deliver a punch, and just a really solid player.
Yeah, something similar to what we've talked about with safeties as well. Is like they just slowly, we noticed, just kind of started working their way down our boards, and the wrong kind of down. And so I think it's gonna be interesting to see where he falls. I can see him going much earlier than this, maybe early second round. But I think just on the overall prospect level though as well, I think that he's going to be around this late second, early third type range. So Christian Haynes, guard from UConn, really liked him at the Senior Bowl. I think he is kind of separated himself in that kind of second tier of interior offensive linemen behind Jackson Powers Johnson and Zach Frazier from West Virginia. My apologies. So I think he's done really well. I'm going to be very curious to see where he ends up falling as well. Once again, similar to Cameron Kitchens, if it wasn't for the receivers or the other offensive tackle, so to say, in this draft, he absolutely could be up higher as well. So wrapping up the top 60 here, Xavier Leggett, receiver from South Carolina, Edrin Cooper, linebacker from Texas A&M, and then Jalen Polk, receiver from Washington. Ryan, which of these 3 guys do you think is going to be taken first?
I would honestly have to lean towards Xavier Leggett, who we have here at 3rd. He's the 6'3", 220 guy that runs the 4.39. Like, that's just – he's height, weight, speed. He runs good routes. He has good hands. He can win off routes. He can win in contested catch situations. But I think when you look at the other 2 prospects here, I think both of those guys, Edrin Cooper, if you need an athletic linebacker that can just about do everything that you ask of him, that Edrin Cooper is that exactly. And then Jalen Polk played second fiddle to Rome Odunze, but in the NFL, I think he would be a perfect complementary piece to just about anybody. I saw a comp that I just kind of can't get out of my head, but he's kind of more of a juiced up Jacoby Myers, where he's a little faster. He gets in and out of his breaks a little bit better. He has just as good of hands because Jacoby Myers has great hands, but like just a really, really solid receiver. And some team, if you're looking for that bigger Z receiver that has that explosiveness, I think Jalen Polk is your guy.
Well, and I was thinking as well, so I'll disagree. I think Jalen Polk could be the guy that comes off first, just because I think if you have that big number 1 type receiver, like who's going to be a guy. So let's look at Cincinnati, for example. Tyler Boyd might be moving on. T. Higgins just requested a trade after they franchise tagged him. If you're looking for a guy, I think, who can complement Jamar Chase being that offense, I think Jalen Polk could be the guy, because he's more consistent. I think you can know what you're going to go and get from them. Xavier Leggett, I think, can almost develop into being the guy, but at the same time, I can also see him turning into more of a, I don't mean this as a knock against Gabe Davis, but as a guy who is,
I can see that,
your go ball type guy or your run blocking receiver. If that makes sense, a great locker room guy. But if you're looking for that consistent production, I could see him being kind of boom or bust coming every Sunday. Well, Jalen Polk might be that more consistent. He's going to get you 50 to 70 yards.
I agree. I do think it will depend on what teams need. Like, if you need the bigger outside receiver, so like I will say, like, for a team like New England that's picking at 68, if they want to move up and get an Xavier Leggett, I think that would work, especially if they go and they get a Hollywood Brown, Calvin Ridley, or a Tyler Boyd specifically, that's going to be more of that nuanced route runner.
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting mix there just to kind of see. So that is it for the second group of 20 that we're doing here. So if you're still with us before we go on, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you think of our rankings so far. Do you love it? Do you hate it? What players do you think are astronomically out of place? And